Alright, now remember I mentioned that water has pressure in Dwarf Fortress. So what that means is the river, left to its own devices, would spread out on this floor. -1 here. -1 sea level. It would spread out evenly across it would spread out evenly across the entirety of Z level -1. And because it's a river and an infinite source, it would keep flooding in at that level up here until it flooded this entire floor if it were excavated. As best it could, anyway. Left to its own devices and dropped down through a channel, the river will flood back up to one level below that as best it can. It will try to flood all the way back up to here eventually, but only when it can cover it. It will only flood back up through the bottom up to here. So, what does that mean for us? Well, it means the water that suddenly rushes down, what, 12 floors, 13 floors? 13 floors, and then comes back up a couple floors, is pressurized to level -2, -1, something like. Which means that if we didn't have a mechanism to reduce that pressure, it would flood from the staircases we've dug out into our wells, up through the hole where the well is actually built, into the main fortress proper, up the main staircases, flooding us out every floor, floor by floor, floor after floor, until it reached floor -2, and our entire fortress was flooded. You don't want that. That's bad. So, in Dwarf Fortress, you build what's called a pressure reducer, a pressure regulator. And it's very simple. It's just a diagonal, right here. One diagonal. Bing, bing, done. That's it. Now, I've dug 2 for aesthetics purposes and to allow for greater water flow. But by reducing the pressure, I reset the pressure of the water from -2 on this side to -11 on this side. The water will not flood above this floor after it passes through that diagonal. This effectively reduces the pressure of the water, and it will only rise to this floor, which is good, because right above that's where we want to build the well caps, the well tops. So the water will flood into this reservoir we've dug that's several floors deep and quite large, and fill this area, including these staircases that lead up, but it won't flood out of these holes. It'll stay down where we want it. And that's how you get a reliable indoor water source that won't flood, that will refill itself. There are a few other methods you can use, you can employ. You could employ buckets to fill up a hole. That'll get you stagnant water, but that's better than nothing. You can employ ponds to basically act as rain traps if you're in an area that doesn't have a river, for example. I've done that. You have to be a little more cognizant of not having as much water to build giant plumbing systems like this. So your rain trap well, for example, is going to be fairly minimal in terms of size. You're going to, unless you have a lot of ponds, you're not going to have enough water in those ponds to store. Additionally, you can run into problems in deserts, for example, where the ponds don't refill quickly or at all, leading to cases where you can actually run out of water. So it's important if you're in one of those areas that you get those wells dug fairly quickly and early so that you can get the water underground and stored safely for your later use, because it's possible that the ponds themselves may dry out and not refill. But all of that's moot without a couple of things that we haven't done yet. So we haven't built our grate, which we asked to be made, but we never actually planted it. So we need to plant our grate here. And what that will do is keep anybody from swimming in. They won't be able to get in this way. Anybody who does walk in, of course, is going to have to deal with the fact that they could potentially drown, but then at the far side there's a grate and they can't get into the fortress anyway. Once that grate is in place, we'll be ready to open up the well. Now, a couple of considerations that I'm not paying attention to here because I don't normally worry about them. There's no way to drain this well or to stop the input flow if we should need to. If, for example, I decided I wanted to expand it or tap this plumbing system later, I'm going to have to do it very carefully and in a particular way without being able to shut off the input flow. And so I'll have to dig my entire system somewhere else and then come back over here and hook it up, rather than being able to shut the water flow off and excavate from this end, for example. If I wanted to guarantee water flow for a water wheel coming out of this well, for example, I would have to make sure that I was very cognizant of how I handled my pressure and how I tapped this water system. Normally that's not really a big deal. If I decide I want an additional channel of water underground for a water wheel or for a mist generator or whatever, then at that point I'll dig myself another channel following the rough path of this one, and they'll be like parallel pipes. I normally won't worry too much about tapping this. If I did want to tap it, I can safely tap it below this diagonal where the water has been depressurized. But again, tapping it up here would mean that I suddenly have penetrated the pressurized water, and if it didn't flow through a diagonal somewhere else, so for example, if I punched a hole into this pipe from above, suddenly I have a nice orthogonal connection that's not diagonal, and the water will flood up into that channel and back into wherever it came from. So I have to be careful that any work channels I dig have some sort of emergency depressurization in them, built into them, so that I don't flood myself out completely if I make a terrible mistake. Alright, so that gets our plumbing up, and as soon as our grate gets built, we can open up the plumbing and let the water in, which I'm looking forward to, actually. Now, what about fishing, I can hear some of you say. Right, we haven't done fishing yet. So let's go up a few floors here. In our farm area here, we'll dig a small channel. And yes, that's going to temporarily be a vulnerability in our fortress. That's okay. We're not going to have it very long. And what we're going to do here is quickly dig out a tunnel. Okay, and we're going to build a small shed that will stick out over the river here and have a hole in the floor where they can fish through a grate. And then we'll wall that all back in so that the way back into the fortress is inside the shed. And at that point, the only way into the shed will be from inside the fortress. And that will be our little fisherman's shed where they'll do all their fishing. We'll set up fishing processing areas right here to process the incoming fish, and then they'll get moved from there into the main food stockpile. And at that point, we'll have fishing set up in our fortress and done. We won't have to mess with it anymore. It'll be finished. It is possible, unless Toady has fixed it, and I didn't notice it in the patch notes when I was trying to review them last night. As far as I know, it is still possible eventually to fish all the fish that there are to fish and run out. But even if it's not, it's kind of hard to rely on fish as a primary food source if you're not in a biome where you're going to see lots and lots of fish. If you're not on the coast with a river adjacent, you probably aren't going to really get by on fish forever, would be my guess. You're just not going to have enough fish available to your dwarves. So, let's get our fortress's shed up here. And wood is cheap and light and readily available, and I'm not worried about fire per se, so we're going to go ahead and get a wooden floor up. Since I can wall this in, a wooden floor here isn't going to hurt me in the bit. And if I decide I want to be fireproof, I can put walls up over the top of that. You have to be cognizant of the fact that your diagonals are a little more problematic. So once they've got that floor up and running, we'll build a couple little spurs out here off a tip that will let us build the diagonal points on the shed. Now at the moment, nobody's doing that work, and so I think it's carpentry. So what we're going to do is we're going to cheat. Make sure there's no... This is construction, and nobody has construction enabled at the moment. Right now, I need everybody able to do those. And everybody go running off to grab all the logs we need to build the shed, and we'll put the shed together really, really quickly. And then I'm going to actually go back and remove that middle floor there and build a grate. But for right now, I need it to be able to get the floor built. Okay, and our guys will go and grab the stone necessary to get the stone wall up and built. And we'll just build ourselves a rough stone hut here, basically, with a wooden floor. Once these points on the ends here are done, these aren't permanent. I'm going to remove these. But I need them there in order to anchor these walls so that I can get all of the wall built all the way out. Once these walls are out here, they'll anchor to themselves. But to get them built initially, I need to have something to attach them to, and these walls under construction don't count. Your dwarves need a place to stand while they do that work. Now, in addition to walls and a floor, we're going to want a ceiling, and that means a ramp or a staircase on the outside. Ramp is easy and quick, so we're going to do a ramp. We want that well away from the main walls. We don't want somebody to be able to scale on top of the fishing shed and somehow get into the fort from there, obviously. Remember that jumping and climbing are now things, and your goblins will attempt to scale your walls to get in. And I see that our caravan has arrived. And yes, I am thankful that carp aren't violent dwarf murderers anymore, but that doesn't matter. There's still sea sponges and other things to worry about in the ocean now. And you can't raise mer people for their crafts anymore. That's terrible. That's awful. Tony should never have made that change. Okay, and the wall is almost done. Now, keep in mind, the wagons didn't stop because the depot is built, but the wagons can't get down the stairs, so only the traders on foot and with pack animals will actually show up to trade this time out. That's okay. We don't care. If you want to make sure that they have the maximum amount of goods available for you to buy or seize, make sure your depot is accessible to a wagon. Ours is not. You can check wagon accessibility if you're looking at your depot. By hitting Shift D, and it will show you the walkable path for your depot. That W is wagon accessible path. That's okay. It doesn't have to be the whole area. Just one nice, neat, contiguous line of wagon path is good. The problem is that the wagon can't go upstairs, and there's no other way out of here, so this is as much as the wagon can get to from our depot. Obviously, that's not going to work, so no wagons this time out. I don't care. It's no big deal. We don't really have all that much stuff to trade anyway. Looks like Tartarus is going to be our part-time broker because he's the best at it. We will request that he immediately get to the depot. I don't believe that Toady has changed the priority of the depot job, however. So I'm sure he will keep making stuff in the workshop until we tell him to stop. Make sure Toady didn't do something crazy like make depot. Okay. Need to make sure everyone will move my trade goods to depot. Except the broker, because I need him to be on site to do the trading. Now then. It looks like we made about 5 serrated bronze discs, so we'll get those moved. Our dwarves will haul the discs to the depot. Our broker will come running here in a minute once he's finished doing whatever he was doing. There he is, stationed in the depot. Good, good. And then we can bring up the trade window, which allows us to say, okay, well, we're going to give you this 2,520 dwarf buck bronze disc for just about everything you have on your wagon. Notice we can take these bronze bars and therefore make another bronze disc. So 1 bronze disc, 2 bronze bars, 50, 25, 20, 50, 25, 20. Oh, right, massively profitable. Keep in mind, lignite blocks cannot be processed back to coal. They are effectively stone blocks at this point. Raw clear and raw crystal glass are hard to manufacture in your fort. They're not particularly valuable on their own, but they can be cut into cut crystal glass gems, for example, and then mounted on items as highly valuable decorations. Even if you're not doing pottery as a main thing, I highly recommend buying any fire clay that does show up. You can make any clay. You can make clay wares out of it in a hurry, or if somebody gets a mood where they need clay, fire clay is the most expensive kind. It looks like there's a pair of alpaca, both female and male here, so we're going to pick those up. There's a blue peahen, so that's an additional bird of the same kind we already have. Let's talk about birds for a moment, because I kind of glossed over that when I was doing the embark. I picked them out, but didn't explain why I picked blue peahens now that I'm remembering. Birds are kind of a trade-off between meat and eggs and maturity cycles. Turkeys are technically the most productive birds. They have the most meat, they lay the most eggs. In terms of overall production, they are by far the most productive birds. So if you're looking for just raw production from your bird industry, you want turkeys. The reason I've taken blue peahens on the other hand, is that they're great egg producers, and I don't really necessarily need them for the meat as much as I do for the eggs. And the blue peahens are just fantastic egg producers, and they mature in a year, whereas the turkeys turn over in 2 years. So although I don't get as much per harvest, I can harvest more often with the blue peahens. Milk is a relatively cheap raw good that can be made into cheese. It's always a good idea to buy drinks if you don't have an ample supply on hand, and we really don't. I'll pick up a bucket or two that are undecorated. I'm not so much worried about these items with decorations. I don't really need to spend 160 dwarf bucks worth of my stuff on a bucket. 20 maybe for this bucket that's a little higher quality, yay, who cares? But I'm really just more concerned with, do I have a bucket? Not, is the bucket gem covered? Let's see here. You can see here the bags, for example. Gypsum plaster is 60 units off the top. It was 1 when we bought it. White sand is 31 for a bag. It was 1 when we bought it. White sand 61 because this is made out of pigtail, so the bag is more expensive, and you can see the price jumps. Bags are always a good thing to have on hand. We'll also want to pick up any cloth they may have brought. It's 85 bucks for that entire bin of leather. I'll take the whole thing. It's 85 bucks for that one. I'm taking it all. It's leather. I'm taking that all. And you can kind of see down here trader profit and value. If your trader is not very good, and ours is kind of middling, you want to make sure that your trader is roughly 50% profit. You can start going down from there as your trader gets better. Really highly skilled, you're still never going to get the trader to trade at a loss, ever. And cutting the trader's profit down too far makes them a little stingier next season. So it's not necessarily a good thing to skin them for every dwarf buck worth of items. It's not necessarily a useful thing to do. Now this is 600 dwarf bucks. I don't necessarily need everything, but a few pieces of undyed silk would be really nice. He only has 1 undyed piece. Most of the rest is dyed, so we'll have to just make do with that. It's not terribly expensive. Let's see here. A couple anvils would allow us to open up new forges. They're not too expensive. Steel would be much more expensive as an anvil. It's not necessarily any better. We do want to pick up meats. Drinks and meats, I usually pick those up because if you're going to spend, and I don't necessarily pick the expensive stuff up, but pick it all up and make it into meals. These 5 perch are costing me 2 dwarf bucks a piece. When mixed together with all of the other food I could theoretically make into roasts, all these artichoke hearts and spinach leaves and corybush leaves and bilberries and caperberries, amaranth leaves and what all, I can make roasts that are worth several hundred in exchange. So this is like everything else that you can trade in Dwarf Fortress. Anything you can trade is probably much more valuable than what you're going to buy to make it. So buy the raw ingredients and turn around and produce stuff that you can turn around and sell to the caravan, and you are going to be massively profitable pretty much no matter what you do. There's a few standouts that are particularly useful. Serrated discs come immediately to mind. Meals from food come immediately to mind. Those also use materials that you are very likely to pick up. Metal bars are things you're going to want anyway, so your discs are covered. Glass is something you're going to want anyway, so your discs are covered. Food is something you're going to want for your dwarves to eat, so making meals from the raw food just extends it, basically. Okay, and yeah, we'll pick up some parchment sheets because why not? We do have a writer on hand. We'll need to get some scroll rollers and start working on that as well, but that's not really a high priority at the moment. Let's see, anything useful I may have missed? Let's see. Oh, looky there, seeds, rock nut bag. Should have brought that. That's definitely coming. A couple bags here I missed. Not worried about the dwarven sugar or the dimple dye. Pity they didn't bring me more seeds this way, but oh well, we'll make do. Took all that effort to bring me empty metal cages, but didn't bother to bring me more drinks that I would have bought in a heartbeat. Okay, now in addition to the animals I bought for use, that would be the alpaca mated pair here, you might consider buying other animals simply to butcher them. The drake and the guinea hen here, I get the cage for free anyway. I might as well buy them and then butcher them and add their meat to my stocks. I don't necessarily want to raise them. I don't really care about them, but I can go ahead and make use of them. And since they don't have the wagons, that's pretty much everything at this point. So we're already trading the 1 disc. If I add a second disc up there, you'll see he's making roughly 50% profit here. That's a little high. Let's go down about there. That might be a little low, but we'll try it. Let's see. So now we can say, okay, are you ready to take that? Yeah, let's try that. Yes, please do that. And he wants to add 3 discs. Oh no, buddy, you are out of your fucking mind. I'm not giving you $5,000 in profit on fucking $2,000 worth of goods. You are out of your fucking gourd. The trader will always ask for it really is like a haggle. He'll ask for more than you should give him. You must go back the other direction if he asks for more. This should be a little closer. He should take this. There we go. And so I save myself another 2,500 worth of disc that I get to keep or use for something else. Now what'll happen is that the goods we've now bought are on the depot, and our dwarves will move them into stockpiles where they belong, if we have stockpiles for them, that is. So let's see. This needs to be prepared food, which we don't have going yet, and this needs to be drinks. And don't forget the barrels. And we need to make sure that it takes from our temporary stockpile so that any drinks still on hand get sucked into the main stockpile where we want them. Speaking of drinks, we're probably running low now. We're getting close. Yep, we just bought a bunch from them, so that's probably all we have is what we bought. So let's make sure our stills are up, and they are. That's good. Let's make sure we get this set up, and if we've got any plants, let's get to brewing. If we don't have plants, then it's time we get our farmer onto his other task. Now, temporarily, I'm going to put these on a repeat task. They'll just cancel when they're done. That's okay. When they cancel, I'll go back and put in a proper work order. But for now, I just want to crank food out. I want to crank drinks out until we don't have any plants left. This will turn over our seeds en masse, allowing us to get back to planting as quickly as possible. Now, I need to have some people doing brewing. And we're done with the broker duties. So at this point, Tartarus is kind of freed up. We're going to put him on brewing duty. So he's going to start making booze for us. And we're going to remove those 3 spots in the shed. One is going to be where we'll build the grate. One is going to be where we'll build walls. Or those other 2 are going to be where we'll build the walls. So once those are removed, we can start filling them in with what goes in those holes. And then we'll be almost done with the shed. In fact, we want to go up 1 floor. And it looks like we're going to have to cut that tree down because it's probably going to be in the way. We'll see. Yep, those 2 trees are in the way because one's blocking the ramp and the other's blocking part of the roof. Okay, that's what I thought. I figured that block. So we need to trim back the hedges, as it were. And build a wall. And just like the doors earlier, I'm going to use planning mode to designate a grate for this spot, regardless of what its quality is. I don't really care. I'll put a grate here as well, because we're getting ready to punch a hole here, and I'm going to floor that up, excuse me. I don't want to do a grate there. Okay, I was checking to make sure our grate downstairs has been installed, and now that it has, we can go ahead and channel out the wall between our pipe, and the river from above right here. So we'll punch a hole in the wall from above by digging it out. That'll let the water flow into that staircase, and when it does, then it'll flow down into the well. You can see the water starting to flow into the well here. Da-da-da. If I drop down, what you're seeing is the water flash flood down this staircase all the way to the bottom, where it will fill up this area and come back up the far side. And then it will flood into this room, and remember, all this water is pressurized, so this is why it got here so fast. Now, once it hits those diagonals, it's depressurized, and it's just sort of spreading out by gravity a little bit. So make sure, if you have a pressure regulator, that you build it close to the destination and not close to the source. So the water is starting to spill in and fill up our well. Okay, that's water settled now. Someone is asking if I finished walling up the caves. No, we did not. Thank you for asking. We did designate the tree, but it never got cut, so we got to get that done. And the way we're going to do that is appoint our engineer into wood cutting duty. And since we don't have any mechanisms to be built, he's going to go into wood cutting, and he will cut those 2 or 3 trees that are in the way of our current construction. Is the water in your well suitable for fishing? The answer is, it depends. Sometimes your dwarves can catch fish there, sometimes they can't, and I couldn't honestly tell you what the difference is. However, fishing in a river is pretty much universally going to be viable. No, the grate doesn't work for vermin. It doesn't work that way. Vermin fish, the fish you catch as dwarves, aren't actually creatures that you can filter out with a grate or stop with a wall. They effectively don't exist in the world. They are basically just a number. Your dwarf throws his bait out there to catch his fish or whatever, and the game rolls a chance to catch a fish. And if it does, it goes out to the count of fish of that type, and it reduces it by 1. And that's the way it works. It doesn't actually catch a real fish. It just pulls it from the count and gives the dwarf a fish, basically. So, you can build a grate, and technically I believe you can still technically sometimes catch fish there. I haven't seen it work reliably, and I wouldn't rely on it. Building a shed really isn't all that much work. If you have a source of water on your site to do fishing at all, then building a shed is relatively trivial to do, and it gives your fishermen perfectly secure access to a safe fishing area. It doesn't hurt to designate a fishing area in your well. You can have them try to fish there. If they catch something, great. If they don't, they'll go back to the other fishing areas where they will. The worst you would see at that point is a little bit of cancellation spam as they fail to catch fish. Alright, so now that we've got our guy cutting trees again, I hope. Let's make sure he's actually doing that now. Is he felling trees? Good, good. Did he fell this tree down here first? No, he did not, but that's kind of the most important one. So let's let him fell those 2 trees upstairs with the shed. There's one. And then those 4 trees. Notice some of those logs fell in the river and are effectively unretrievable unless I want to try and pump the river dry. That's not going to happen, so we can ignore those. And the easiest way to ignore things you no longer care about or want to concern yourself with whatsoever, and I mean in any way, shape, fashion, or form, is to hide and forbid them, not that order. So we will designate some items for forbid. This will keep your dwarves from trying to use those items or path to those items. It will keep them from considering them part of your inventory for purposes of counting. Once they're forbidden, your dwarves won't touch them, even to move them, if they have to get to something that's underneath them, basically. If you forbid a log on a spot in your farm plot, that spot will never, ever get planted, period. So make sure you really want something where it is when you forbid it. It's never going to be anywhere else. Hiding is only a graphical effect. It does not affect your dwarves whatsoever. It only affects you. You can hide stones, and then your dwarves can come along, pick them up, and use them in buildings. If the stone is still hidden, no promises whether the thing it's made out of is still visible. Your dwarves will see it just fine, but you, the player, won't be able to see it. So you have to be cognizant of what you're hiding. Typically, I only hide stuff once it's forbidden and I no longer want to see it, or stuff to clear up clutter. I know some folks out there are perhaps a little OCD about the clutter of all these stones laying around your fort. Well, there's a simple solution. You could simply designate them all as hidden, and they're still there. They're still usable by your dwarves, but you, the player, will never be able to see them. If you need them back, you can then unhide them later. And that will make them visible again. Those stones are still present. They are simply, invisible to me, the player. Notice if I highlight the area and query for it, the siltstone is still here, it's just marked as hidden. Invisible. Now, my dwarves need some siltstone, they'll come along pick it up, no problem. Doesn't bother them whatsoever. But I don't have to see it, I don't have to look at it, it's not there. Getting a little lower on drinks, too. What is that dude doing? Oh, that's right, he still thinks he's trading at the depot. Well, that's not what we want you doing. You're done with that job. Oops. No, really, you're done with that job. Now, get to the brewing, man. Get to it. Chop, chop. Okay, now that we've done some trading, we're probably going to see a little bigger migrant wave.
Delicious.
As always, everyone coming into the fort is automatically a peasant, period, full stop. You become something else if and only if I decide you have something useful. This person, for example, is a useful farmer. And now when I sort these folks as professions, I know that these folks here are doing something in particular that I need them to do. Now that I have a few haulers who have the brewing task in their list, I can get this guy back to doing what he should be doing, which is metal work. Now, since I don't actually have a forge at the moment, I'm going to leave him doing some brewing as well, so that he's got something else. In fact, I'll put him on brewing and cooking, because why not? And he can do brewing and cooking while we're waiting on his forge to get up and running. Slowly the moss is spreading. Okay, let's see here. Dining room. Did we get our tables ever done? Did we get some tables? We got tables. Do we have chairs? We have chairs? Yes, we have chairs. Good, good. Again, at this point in my fortress's lifespan, I'm not worried about these not being the highest quality tables and chairs. I just want tables and chairs so we can get a dining hall built. Any dining hall is better than no dining hall. So now we have dining hall done. It looks like we have a lot of idlers, probably because nobody's doing hauling. So let's do furniture hauling. Because if you're really idling around and doing nothing, you can at least install the furniture in the dining room. Okay, and now that we have tables and chairs going in, and I will allow my dwarves to throw parties, just not yet. So right now we're going to skip the hall portion of the meeting hall. So if we wanted to, we could make this into a library, a temple, or a tavern. For right now, I just want to have my dwarves having a private dining room, so this is what it'll be. If you want to have your dining room also be your tavern, that's perfectly viable. Your dwarves will visit the tavern sooner or later anyway, even if you don't have them assigned. This will give you the library and the temple we'll get to in a moment, but the tavern basically allows you to serve visitors and have folks come to your fortress. We're not quite ready to start that up. We barely have enough production to keep our own dwarves running, let alone worrying about visitors coming to our fort and sucking up all our booze. So for now, we're going to skip that part. And we're going to create a zone here, though. And the zone we're going to create is called a meeting area. And meeting areas are where dwarves will try to path to, where they'll try to get to, when they first arrive on your site, or when they have nothing to do, no jobs to do. So all your idlers will come to the dining hall. So I know where everybody will end up when they're not busy. They'll be here. This makes them in one place, which means that if there are any idle military, for example, they're well defended. It puts them close to the barracks in this case, because our barracks is literally right upstairs. And it means that my entire dwarf population is literally going to be within like 2 floors whenever they're not doing any production or sleeping. They're going to be literally right there at the front of the fort to defend it. So if we have to get to the point where we're doing mass militia drafting in order to defend our fortress, if I have to just put a crossbow in everybody's hands and send them off to the front lines, well, all my soldiers are going to be directly adjacent to where the crossbows and armor are, and we'll be able to armor the whole fortress in seconds. Okay, they finally got that done. Yay! So now we have walls on the bottom floor here. We need to finish up the wall. And we're doing a bit of a trick here. I'm going to suspend these the top row of these jobs, basically. I don't want my dwarves to stand north of the wall as they build it. I want them to stand on the staircases inside the fortress and build these 3 squares, because if they stand outside, then they have no way back in without climbing over the wall to get back in. And although they can get away with that now, once I start getting higher up, it's going to be much more difficult to climb across the northern wall, obviously. So once I've got this first floor done, then I can come back and I can build the corners on the second floor and finish the second floor, and then go up to the third floor and build the corners on the third floor, and so forth and so on as I go up the tower, basically. And we have 3 floors of wall we have to build here to wall that back in. Now, way down here at the bottom, did we ever finish digging this out? No, we did not, so we need to do that. And lastly, up top, let's talk drawbridge. I think I made some of those in wood instead of stone. Okay, and that'll get us a nice drawbridge and basically just a small tower keep. There's not even going to be anything in it. It's just going to be 1 floor and roofed over, just like the shed is. This is only intended to be a service access, and ideally, once it's no longer needed, we'll close it up and never really use it again. But if we needed to make an emergency sortie, for example, we could crack the drawbridge and send our dwarves out directly onto the surface and theoretically pin an enemy inside our tunnels. So it does serve purpose later on, potentially, if we need it, and it's small enough as an access point that we can easily wall it in and defend it. Now, we do need to get these things deconstructed and off the surface, get the rest of our animals inside, get this walled up, get this walled up, get the caverns walled up, and then we've reached the security plateau, basically, at that point. You can always lock yourself in, and you can wait a siege out if you have to. Yeah, okay, sure, the migrants that show up will get slaughtered, but everybody in the fortress would have survived, which is kind of the point. Since that's exactly what would have happened in a feudal era siege anyway, that's kind of realistic, actually. Someone was asking if I'm going to build a mist generator. We may look at actually building a mist generator at some point for the dining room. For right now, I'm not too worried about it. Mist generators do chew up a good chunk of your frame rate. It's not necessarily something that I consider a high priority thing. It's more of a capstone feature for a fortress. Mist is nice, but it doesn't necessarily, have all the benefits that we're going to want. For example, now that temples are around, your dwarves can get a massive stress relief from, praying in the temple. We really kind of need to get a small shrine of some sort up right now, even if we don't necessarily intend to keep it as a permanent temple. So, let's see here. How do we want to do this? Well, let me think. Okay, so did we ever put the grate in? We'll floor over those two holes and get that grate rebuilt, and at that point our fishing shed is at least walled in. Now we need to make sure that the roof is covered. And so they'll come around, use the ramp, get on top of the wall, and start building all these floor pieces in, and that will basically act as a roof over the top of the level below it. And this is how Dwarf Fortress works. Walls obstruct on their level and act as floors for the level above. But this space underneath is hollow, and this floor on the level above acts as a roof for this. If you've seen people build stuff in Fallout 4, it's a very similar process if you're building piece by piece and not using the pre-builds. The difference there is that you can have pieces that act as roofs, basically, that are not technically floors above, and in Dwarf Fortress that's not the case. If it's a roof below, it's walkable above. So our furnace operator is still doing his furnace operations, and slowly we're getting our walls built here. Oh, right, they're going to start complaining because all the dogs are in the spot. Whoops, not the peahen. Dope! And that'll get those things out of the cages as well. So let's talk about that for a moment. We don't have yet, and need to get built immediately, a butcher's workshop. My dwarves are complaining we can't build because all the dogs are getting in the way. As soon as somebody comes along and moves the dogs, we'll be in good shape. Alright, looks like we finally managed to grind through... Was it barrels you're complaining about? Oh, no, it's barrels he's complaining about. Okay, well we can make more barrels, but we won't make barrels, we'll make stone pots. Down here somewhere we had a masonry floor. We were kind of starting in the middle of our barracks, and that's not going to be permanent, but down here below that... we can put all our miners back to work. We did have miners, right? All asleep? Oh, they're making something. I do want them to finish whatever that is. And folks are finally... Oh, hang on. Got to get the puppies moved to the new zone too, now that they've had puppies. Which is good, because that'll give us our first litter of dogs to defend ourselves with. I think our architect is otherwise occupied at the moment, unfortunately. I need to get him on that and to get that bridge done. Save, and this is why we do seasonal saves, folks. I need to remember to set that up in the init so that we don't have to deal with that in the future. Let's see, where were we here? Year 250. Definitely still in the first year. That's good. Let's see, where did that leave us? What did we lose? Looks like we lost the well. Probably the shed too, obviously. Yep. So I'll have to rebuild all of that. Looks like we at least have the kitchen stockpiles working. Got to re-trigger dig circles so that that will work. Okay. Actually, this would be autumn, wouldn't it? If we get done quickly enough with this depot, theoretically we might still catch the wagons, because I don't think we've done the trading yet either. So we may be able to get the wagons too this time if we build a temporary depot up on the surface for a moment. Okay, I think I'm going to let these guys run on autopilot for a second here while I take care of something. Cross your fingers.